The Crusades in medieval Europe was truly led by people's religions. The Crusades was over who had control over the Holy Land, which was Jerusalem. The Holy Land was important to three major religions, which were Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Religion had a great power over the people and the Crusades during the Middle Ages. The Holy Land was important to Christianity because it was where Christ was believed to be crucified, and the people thought that if they fought, then all their sins would be forgiven. The Holy Land was important to the Muslims because that's where they believed Muhammad ascended into heaven. It was important to the Jews because Jerusalem was the site of the original temple built by King Solomon. The Europeans' reason for war was not only for control of the Holy Land, but also trade routes between Africa, Asia, and Europe. They also wanted riches, honor, and rewards after death. The people who fought in the Crusades was mostly Europe and the Holy Roman Empire. Arabs fought back because they had control over Jerusalem at the time. During the First Crusade, there was about 30,000 soldiers from Europe, which included knights, peasants, and other commoners. The First Crusade, which occurred in 1095 to 1099, was the most successful. They drove out the Turks and took control of Jerusalem. It was started by Pope Urban II. Pope Urban II issued this call for a Holy Crusade, a war to recapture the Holy Land in 1095 CE. Your brethren who live in the Middle East are in urgent need for your help, for as most of you have heard, the Turks and the Arabs have attacked them and have conquered the territory of Romania, the Byzantine Empire. They have occupied more and more of the lands of those Christians. They have killed and captured many, and have destroyed the churches and devastated the empire. All who die, by the way, whether land or by sea, or in battle against the passions, shall have immediate remission of sins. From certain points of view, it was seen as a bloody massacre and was horrid. Someone who was in the First Crusade wrote, Count Raymond and his men who were attacking the wall on the other side did not yet know of all this, until they saw the Saracens leap from the wall in front of them. Forthwith, they joyfully rushed into the city to pursue and kill the nefarious enemies as their comrades were already doing. Some Saracens, Arabs, and Ethiopians took refuge in the Tower of David. Others fled to the temples of the Lord and of Solomon. A great fight took place in the court and porch of the temples, where they were unable to escape from our gladiators. Many fled to the roof of the temple of Solomon and were shot with arrows so that they fell to the ground dead. In this temple, almost 10,000 were killed. Indeed, if you had ever been there, you would have seen our feet colored to our ankles with the blood of the slain. But what more shall I relate? None of them were left alive, neither women nor children were spared. The People's Crusade, which occurred in 1096, lasted about 6 months. The Pope wanted the Holy Land. Peter the Hermit had put together an army of peasants and common people, but the crusade was a failure. Most died or became slaves. They never captured the Holy Land. The Second Crusade, which occurred in 1147 to 1149, was launched by the conquering of Edessa, which was done by the Turks. The entire population was killed or sold into slavery. The crusade was overall unsuccessful. In 1187, the Sultan Saladin recaptured the Holy Land from the Christians. In fact, he even gave a speech to encourage his people. If God blesses us by enabling us to drive his enemies out of Jerusalem, how fortunate and happy we would be. For Jerusalem has been controlled by the enemy for 91 years, during which time God has received nothing from us here in the way of adoration. At the same time, the zeal and devotion of the Muslim rulers to deliver the vanquished, time passed and so many in different generations, while the Franks succeeded in rooting themselves strongly there. Now God has reserved the merit of his recovery for one house, the house of the sons of Ayub, in order to unite all hearts in appreciation of its members. The Third Crusade was launched by Emperor Barbarossa of Germany, King Philip Augustus of France, and King Richard the Lionheart of England. King Richard fought Saladin for years but wasn't able to capture Jerusalem, but was able to make a treaty to allow pilgrims to visit the Holy Land. This crusade lasted from 1187 to 1192. The Fourth Crusade lasted from 1202 to 1204 and was formed by Pope Innocent because he wanted to take back the Holy Land, but unfortunately he and the soldiers got greedy and sidetracked. They ended up conquering Constantinople. The Children's Crusade, yes, children were fighting in war. Great idea, Middle Ages. It took place in 1212 and started by a French child, Stephen of Blois, and a German kid named Nicholas. Tens of thousands of children were gathered to march to the Holy Land. Obviously, putting children to war is not a good idea. It was a total disaster. No one made it to the Holy Land, and not many were seen again. Some think that they were sold into slavery. There were 5 more crusades after this. None of them were able to recapture the Holy Land. This lasted from 1217 to 1272. Some reasons the Crusades failed could be that the Western and Eastern Europe Byzantine Empire were unable to work together to defeat the Muslims. They also weren't prepared for the long journey. Also, they were sidetracked by their greed to loot other places and were overpowered by the Muslims. The effects of the Crusades weren't all that great either. The split between the Eastern and Western Christianity became permanent. The Byzantine Empire was weakened so bad from the Crusades it could no longer defend itself. The Crusades also broke down feudalism in Western Europe, which gave the kings more power when the lords were away fighting. Also, it opened new trade routes, and as trade grew, so did towns. Later on, towns were introduced to the Middle Ages, but didn't turn out too well either. For a while, it was good, then King John being unfair, then the Black Plague killing millions. The Crusades were mostly driven by religious beliefs, but ended as a complete failure. Religion had great power in the Middle Ages until towns grew, which had less religion. Religion was a big part of their lives, and no wonder wars were started over the Holy Land. So, cue the ending part.